Uh, Welcome and thanks for joining us. This is the first Darabase Meets episode for the Canadian team. And for new viewers or first time people like tuning in, what Darabase Meets is, it's a series of fireside kind of chat style conversations we have with industry thought leaders and experts. We explore all things immersive media, but in particular, we're really interested in exploring how augmented reality and the spatial web are impacting the real estate sector. I'm also very excited before I introduce our two guests to announce we have a newfound partnership in Canada between Darabase and Venturon Limited, which is an investment group that focuses squarely kind of on the real estate startup space and ecosystem. So with that, I'd love to introduce Deena Pantalone and Joanna Creed. Welcome to Darabase Meets.
Thanks, Peter. We're excited to be here and have Darabase here in Canada, finally. We've been talking for a while now, so that's exciting.
Yes.
Thanks, Peter. It's great to be here.
Yeah. Well, awesome, guys. With that, I'll dive into it. Can you just first of all, just tell us who you are and maybe give everyone a bit of a background on who Venturon is?
Great. So I'm Deena Pantalone. I'm the founder of Venturon. I started Venturon about 8 years ago, investing in real estate, prop tech, and sustainable technology. I have an industry background of over 27 years in the real estate, specifically housing and construction market. I'm a partner also in a company called National Homes here in Canada. We build low-rise and high-rise communities. So I use my infrastructure and ecosystem on the housing and construction side to support the Venturon portfolio companies grow and introduce them to other developers all across North America. Venturon invests in pre-seed and seed stage companies all over North America in 4 specific sectors of the industry: housing, construction, industrial, and ESG. I started Venturon basically after exiting a seniors housing portfolio, and friends of mine in the venture capital world asked me to come in and advise them on new technologies that related to the real estate industry, whether an asset owner, a builder would use this type of technology. And that's really where I started to get excited and recognize that the industry is very antiquated, very ripe for adoption of technology. We're far behind fintech and health tech. Started making my own investments. And then fast forward to today where we have a fund, we're raising a fund. Scotiabank is our anchor LP. And Joanna Creed joined my team 5 years ago as she's the director of operations. She's a lawyer by training. We don't hold that against her, but she's our general counsel. And I'll let Joanna tell you a little bit about herself.
Thanks, Dee. So as Dee mentioned, I'm Joanna Creed. I am a former lawyer. I was a corporate and securities lawyer here in Toronto at Goodman's for a number of years. I realized, as much as I loved working at that law firm, that turning prospectuses into the middle of the night was not the best career path for me. And I left Goodman's and I co-founded a SaaS platform, which I ran for a number of years. And I realized shortly after that the founder side in a startup world wasn't where I wanted to be either. And I ran into Deena at dinner one night, and we'll get into the story about how we met after. And she talked about the fund and real estate tech, and I thought it was a great opportunity to bridge my securities law background and my software startup world to be on the deal making side and join the venture world. And we've been working together since the fall of 2019.
Nice. And well, with that, how did you guys meet? You both have I was looking at your background, like very diverse backgrounds. I think it's kind of obvious that 1 + 1 = 3 here, but how did you guys come together and start this?
Well, I guess for your Canadian audience, it's a very Canadian story. Our dads met while our brothers were playing hockey, standing and watching, 5-year-olds skate around with coffees in hand. And we've been family friends ever since. And I actually hadn't seen Deena in a long time and was invited over for dinner at her parents' house. And that's when we started chatting, getting interrupted 17 different times as I was trying to learn what she did. So I actually asked my mom for her cell phone number and called her the next day and said, I really want to actually learn more about this when we don't have our big families blasting us from either side. So it's been a great experience since then.
Wow, and you still get along
We're,
quite.
we're a good team. Yeah. We
Right.
complement each other with each other's, strengths
Yeah.
and weaknesses, which is good. And
Well,
we're, pretty direct and honest. So
well, even in my limited time getting to know you and your team, there's a definite dynamic at play here. So, oh, that's all. I did not know the background. It's good. Is very Canadian. So focusing on obviously you spend your time in the real estate sector, and you spent a lot of time around startups. So what attracted you to Darabase and our team and what we're doing?
So, as Deena mentioned briefly, Venturon's been investing since 2016 in prop tech broadly. And, our thesis has shifted over time where now where we used to focus on sort of building management systems, we've shifted towards sustainability predominantly for this fund. About 80% is going to be deployed into it. But also we're allocating about 20% of the fund into prop tech broadly in the areas that Deena previously mentioned. But that focus of the 20%, we're really looking at things that are software-based, B2B SaaS, and really create alternative revenue streams for asset classes, stabilized assets, because we recognize that with our fund, investing in decarbonization and waste and energy efficiency is highly capital intensive. We really want to focus on the other end of the spectrum with that 20% and things that are like capital expenditure light, integration light, because we want to have a diversified fund. So when we met the Darabase team, we thought this would be a great opportunity to work with a leader in the space that's, thought leadership and innovating and really setting the boundaries. So this partnership allows us to learn together, experiment, pilot, and see where this sort of digital property rights world will take us.
Perfect. So yeah, I think we would fall squarely into that 20% then.
right.
So given that we do have a global audience here, and maybe you could break it down and give a bit of an overview of like what's happening in Canadian real estate these days.
So from when looking at the Canadian real estate industry from a global perspective, I'd say that Canada is known for its stability and strong growth over the years. The market's generally characterized by high demand, especially in our major cities like Toronto, Vancouver, and Montreal, which are leading to the escalating prices that we've seen. The industry is also influenced by our interest rates, government regulations, and the economic conditions. And overall, the Canadian real estate industry is seen as a lucrative investment opportunity, both by domestic and international buyers compared to some other global cities or countries. Currently, we've seen a down market in the past year and a half. However, with the recent interest rate cut, the market's starting to normalize, if you will. I've been in this industry now for over 20 something years, so I've seen a few different cycles come through. But we're currently in a very high cost environment with respect to construction costs, housing costs. The labor crisis is a real issue globally, not only here in Canada, but we're seeing a pivot in the industry that's pushing towards innovation and looking for new innovative products to help streamline the process, save costs, and even on the asset owner side, look for new revenue streams. We're also seeing a shift in the stakeholder and customer behavior. So that started with COVID, but we're seeing that, through that changing environment and evolution of adopting more technology. So you think of, during COVID, we still are with some projects selling virtually from a virtual sales office, or we're looking at spatial advertising as new opportunities. So we're starting to see that slowly adopted here in the Canadian markets.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one thing about the Canadian landscape. Canada is well positioned from an innovation and real estate perspective. We have a very highly educated population. We have some of the biggest, corporate real estate head offices in the world, like Brookfield here in Canada. And we have a relatively clean grid and we have a growing and immigration population that's pushing demand for all this technology, all this housing. So we're well positioned to innovate and lead the frontier in sort of real estate technology.
I love that. And so going back to now the immersive technology we've been kind of alluding to. So augmented reality, how do you see that impacting the Canadian real estate sector? Like how is it going to help transform the Canadian real estate industry, do you think?
Well, I think in Canada, as well as the US, innovation and technology adoption, as you mentioned, including AR, are poised significantly to transform the industry. In both our companies, it's been, a slower adoption in the industry than we would like, but we're starting to reach a tipping point where the adoption is starting to move forward at a pace, especially in areas of sustainability, efficiency, and anything that generates alternative revenue streams, as I mentioned before. So, technologies like AR can really revolutionize the property of viewings by a prospective buyer, by way of example, or a tenant can visualize remotely in more detail, reducing the need for physical visits and speeding up the decision process. So those are some of the tools that are assisting on the sales side. And in particular in the US, there's more significant adoption of these tools. And as I mentioned that, with COVID and being shut down, that really forced the industry to start to adopt the technology more immediately than maybe some of the asset owners or developers were comfortable doing. But that really helped the industry move along slightly. I think that I would say that in the difficult economic times, these are just additional tools that help buyers understand the products that they're buying and act as support to the traditional sales tools that we use, right? Whether that's on the commercial side or the housing side. And we're starting to see, those tools adapt and become a little bit more efficient. So we're going to talk a little bit later on around some of those more specifics of like virtual design studios and other. I think in some of your questions later, you might want to hear more juicy tidbits.
Yeah, we chat about that. One of the things that first attracted me to Darabase, as kind of a former founder myself and startup guy, is the Web 3.0 and we're seeing an evolution and tons of money spent by the Metas, Googles, and Apples of the world to move into wearable technology, which I really do will transform the way we behave as people and consumers. And you keep touching on the opportunity around these new alternative revenue streams, which, as Darabase we've built this global registry that help property owners protect, control, and monetize a new and immersive asset class that we're calling property digital rights. And for our listeners, much like air rights, you own what's above your property, or subterranean rights below your property. You can lease or sell those rights and create new revenue channels. And we believe property digital rights are no different. And I realize this, property digital rights is a very new thing for the industry, and it, is a new asset class. So we're spending a lot of time trying to drive awareness and educating kind of our audiences about this emerging asset class. Can you guys speak to, how do you see property digital rights, and what role do you see them playing, across the real estate sector?
Yeah, I mean, I think augmented reality, as you mentioned, will continue to grow as a marketing medium and tactic. Like, we're at its nascent infancy stage right now, but at some point, it's going to be commonplace in sort of marketing world. And we talk about, to draw the distinction for those that like aren't living and breathing spatial and Web3 things. Like, when we think of virtual worlds, we're thinking like metaverse, Fortnite, Roblox, where little avatars in a virtual space. If you're talking about augmented reality, think of the CN Tower and having a digital Godzilla walking up the top, or maybe it's the Easter Bunny and Lindt chocolate, or, whatever the marketing terms are. You're sort of playing with physical assets that in the physical world rather than a virtual world. Because I think for those people that aren't, living and breathing stuff, like that distinction gets confusing. And once the marketing world takes hold and this becomes commonplace, like this is something that I think would become highly valuable to any physical asset. One, for like protection of that asset and copyright when you're using images in sort of an augmented reality space. But two, because this is something that requires very little, I like to call it like onboarding shrapnel. When you're bringing technology into real estate portfolios and you got to train teams and you got to put sensors in, there's a lot of things that can go wrong and a lot of resistance to this type of technology. But with this, when you're talking about claiming, controlling, and monetizing these property rights for the asset owner, there's very little friction to using this technology. And whether that use case is, I'm Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, and I don't want a Habs thing showing up on, Scotiabank Place during a playoff game, and just to keep it competitors off the screen, or you're a real estate owner that's in a commercial building that's seen rents decline in the world that we're living in right now, and you're like, okay, if I can sell, the side of this building to advertisers, my NOI and my bottom line changes, and I haven't had to do very much, but, take control and work with a publishing team to get advertising that fits within my brand and, my whatever. I'm always lacking the word for this, but like the things that are morally appropriate, whether it's not no alcohol near schools or whatever the legislation prohibits, you can use that to your benefit. And sort of step into this new world order that's coming. If Facebook and Google and everyone's investing billions, like whether we agree with it because we're too old to understand what's next, or we're digital natives and we know it's coming next. Like it's probably coming if this much money is being invested.
I think I just add to that what's exciting, and Joanna and I were discussing this, the other day about Darabase, is that the potential for additional opportunities, not just with existing assets in terms of the spatial marketing, but typically, and I'll just speak on the land development side and housing side, that there's opportunity for those asset owners to not only showcase their projects that are up and coming on. You might buy in a key location of a downtown area like downtown Mississauga or Oakville, a sector of land, and there's a couple buildings or home on it that you might be demolishing to build a condominium or something like that. And it's also a great opportunity to start your pre-sales marketing campaigns using and utilizing the existing buildings prior to the construction that will happen. So I think that there's a lot of opportunities for you guys in the sector, and for us as industry developers and asset owners to capitalize on that, because typically we would lease part of our land to Pattison, right, to advertise, and then I as a builder would take a few months from them to market my project for my new home development.
Yeah. Wow, lots to unpack there. You guys, I don't want to go too deep into the
Oh,
technology.
sorry. Okay, we're giving a fire hose here of info.
Oh no, I think it's good. I just a lot to unpack. So obviously, there's a lot happening in the advertising and marketing space. Like any media, the more consumers that start using it, and I think a lot of people don't realize how prevalent AR is. I'm certainly not the demographic, but I have kids that use, augmented reality every single day. It's already built in Snapchat. Like there's, Google Maps. You're going to see some very cool things coming down the pipe around spatial web and something called VPS, which were all visual positioning systems, which it's all going to be very familiar vernacular, I believe, in a year from now. But Darabase, as we've discussed before, we're concentrating right now solely on that property owner and ensuring that they can protect and control and monetize those rights. And the way they monetize them is is by augmented reality experiences that are funded by advertisers is, the first and most obvious way to monetize that. So I think I had a few more questions, but I actually feel like you touched on them in terms of like what you're looking for in AR and spatial web around your investment philosophy, which you touched on, that you have this portfolio strategy, that you've got this 20% that kind of falls into.
Yeah, but I also think, sorry, Dee, just
Go.
to why, we like Darabase's vision and not is that, we like to support technologies that enhance real estate operations and create value. So, your vision for the spatial web and how you're going to work with just this property, monetizing this property rights is the first step. Iterative disruption in real estate is our view is the way to go, because something too disruptive, real estate's like a super tanker. Like, you can't just turn around. So slow and incremental steps is how the process works. And I think by creating this registration, and maybe it's the lawyer in me, like this systemic system that provides transparency and clarity and gives comfort to those involved, is a great way to take a first step into this sort of augmented reality in the physical space for those that aren't dabbling in it to begin with.
You make a really good point. I'm going to come back to the lawyer in you, because another thing that's kind of fascinating, and this is, you've probably seen this with all sorts of startups, technology is often ahead of the law. Legally, we're catching up to, what does this mean to property owners and asset owners? And, the Pokemon Go example that most people are familiar with from Niantic from how many years ago, like that kind of begged a ton of questions. You had all these gaming characters running through, publicly owned properties and Starbucks and churches, and like there's no real, in the advertising industry, while we have rules and regulations, like no one had really, we just didn't see it coming. So now I think what you're going to see now, that it's going to be monetized by advertisers because enough consumers are using AR, we have no choice but to put some rules and some structure around kind of this new emerging asset class. So I think it's extremely exciting, and that is one of the reasons that we were so excited to work, obviously, with your team. I only have two more questions. I'll jump to them.
Okay.
This is more of a, and I've been in the startup world for 10 years, which is like 100 years in a real job. So
Right.
I've been around.
Dog years.
Dog years. Yeah. So how you guys work with lots of startups, how important is it that technology companies like they truly collaborate with property owners to drive real growth and innovation? Like what do you guys see?
I'll take a first jump at this, Dee, and jump in if you want to add anything. But we often work collaboratively with the companies in our portfolio, and candidly, even some that aren't. And I think it's imperative that they work together to drive innovation for a number of reasons. One, you can address specific problems in the industry you're both facing and co-create the solutions and work together with this iterative process and getting feedback. So if you're working on something, for example, in construction, and you have a VP of construction at a home builder that you can call back and forth and find out what's working and what's not. And it works two ways, because a lot of us that aren't in the tech space are often like, oh, I want this. And an engineer and developer can quickly say like, well, there's no way we can build that to work. So let's figure out what the real problem is, how we can get there. And I think the other big thing is about diversification of risk. So there's definitely like product development that's super helpful and business development helpful, but part of the problem in real estate and bricks and mortars, we're talking about risks in the hundreds of millions and billions of dollars in physical assets. And so if you're working collaboratively in a pilot, in a beta, in something, that level of risk, whether it's revenue risk for the startup or literally physical risk for the real estate owner, we can share that risk in these early stages, and that allows everybody to take a step forward together rather than burdening, a pre-revenue, lightly funded startup with all of this capital risk, and without the asset owner having zero insight into what's coming. So I think that's a big part of it all.
We spend a considerable amount of time in our diligence process. As Joanna mentioned, looking and considering the risk, because you're dealing with, hundreds of millions and billions of dollars of bricks and mortar, and that we run focus groups, and often have consultants that are, who the industry heavily weights, how they're designing, how they're building, what materials are being spec, what technology is being spec. So engineers, architects, designers, and then we have end users like tenants in buildings or homeowners that live in the communities, and then the tech companies and the Venturon team. And so they are in an environment where they can share and speak to experts, to get the feedback. The experts can learn about the new technologies, and that's just one of the ways in which we introduce products into the market, as well as part of our diligence in terms of whether we're going to pilot something or we're going to invest in a product. We also have a report called the Sustainable Property Technology Report for Canada, which is, important to us, because like you mentioned, it's a lot of these things are new, and often the industry, and one of the things in the report that makes the report unique and special is the way we present the report. Venturon does a great job of bridging the two worlds together, of real estate and technology, and in very basic layman terms that the industry can understand. It's a great resource to find new products. Who are the industry experts? Learn from our peers, because quite often it's a copycat industry, right? So if Kingset Capital is doing this, then maybe Brookfield is interested in this, or, and it's not necessarily in the report that we cover off those large asset owners and managers, but we also have some smaller asset owners and developers that share their innovation philosophies and adoption. And then we have a market map that highlights the different technologies in Canada that are available to the built world industry here in Canada. Venturon, however, and for your audience, we deal with a global group, because we invest all over North America, but we work very closely with other accelerators from around the world, like Built World in Germany, Future Cities in London and in Singapore, Cretech out of New York City. So we see a lot of what's happening globally. And that sort of helps us in keeping abreast to what's happening in the markets, and what potentially could be threats in North America, or potential partners. And it's a big mountain to climb, but together, communicating and educating is really a key component to how we start to move the needle.
Nice. And when's the report being released?
So we are just in the process of finishing up our third report, and that you'll see that this coming fall, early fall.
All right, we'll make sure we watch for it and help drive awareness of it. You know what? I'm gonna wrap it up. Last question, guys. This is a pretty broad one, but I'd like to bring it back to how Venturon's positioned around, like, what are other emerging technologies that you're seeing that you think are relevant and to your sector here, to real estate, and how are you positioned to capitalize on it?
So we're launching our fund now, so we are going to have a lot of dry powder to take advantage of the low valuations due to the sort of market correction over the last 18 months. So that's one excellent position that we're in. And as Deena mentioned, all the research that we do, all the time we spend on diligence, like we are not, we are very discerning with capital, and we'll take a long time to make our investments, but we are very helpful to the startups that we invest in. We open doors, we constantly work with them on strategic issues that they're facing. And we are looking, predominantly in the decarbonization space. And there's a lot of tailwinds in that industry right now. We look at the IRA and the income tax credit here in Canada and the regulations that are forthcoming. And I don't know if anyone in the audience was here in Toronto 2 days ago when half the city flooded and the power went out. Whether you want to build net zero or not, we are facing significant climate issues in cities that never faced them before. And so we're looking at technology that's going to help us mitigate and adapt to that level of risk. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for us in that space.
Nice.
Anything that would be?
Any last thoughts, Deena?
Joanna touched on everything. This is typical of us.
Yeah.
Where we will often be like, I was just about to say that, you know.
That's what happens when you meet at a hockey rink with your parents and hang out for 20 years. So yeah.
You
Yeah,
dress
no,
on
I just
Zoom calls always.
I think we're in a unique position, and we are a very special group, and we're pretty humbled by the fact that our founders often refer us to their friends who are quite brilliant as well and have great technology, or other venture capital groups, because of how we work with on the business development side with our portfolio companies. And we don't only do a research or a focus group. You know, when we're looking at investing, we will continue to do that with the portfolio company as they develop their product to help them grow. And I think that, you know, we were discussing a little bit earlier about the types of technology that we've started to see in the industry with virtual sales office or lighting, or, you know, different opportunities. But I mentioned about the virtual sales office. So I know for us on the building side, that's become very helpful in terms of even structural designs and BIM modeling and things like that. So you're starting to see a shift, and it's helpful that, you know, I have a team of real estate experts on the construction and asset management side that Venturon utilizes to help our portfolio companies and really identify what the pain points are and the solutions that we're looking for in the industry that are practical solutions.
Yeah. You know, because I'm 100 years old in the startup world, I have had the opportunity to work with various accelerator groups, venture funds. You know, I've kind of done the gamut, and I have to say your group I've been so impressed with. Not only dynamic, you have a very consultative approach, like which for a startup, it's like you're very hands-on, very consultative, no bullshit. And I think it's going to work really, really well for you. And I'm not surprised at all that you're launching this fund. And with that, I mean, thanks so much for your time.
Thank
I don't,
you.
yeah, you guys were great, and I look forward to chatting again with you guys soon.
For
Awesome.
sure. Thank you. Take care.
Thanks, guys.